go. Okay, so welcome everybody to our webinar on family communications planning and evacuation planning. Denise, Gluhan, and I are going to talk through the presentation today. I'm going to start out and then we'll switch to Denise. So we're going to talk about emergency notifications and some of the basics around that. We'll talk about family communications plans, and then we'll talk about evacuation planning and one of the most topical subjects, which is wildfire. So with that, let's launch into it. So first off is emergency notifications. So hopefully, you are already registered for Alert SCC. So this is our county emergency notification systems, and many of the cities and towns use it as well. It lets us send official alerts, and depending on how you sign up for it and what you register, we can send it through the telephone call, to your cell phone call, send a text message, send an email message, and we really want you to go to it right now. I suppose you could continue paying rapt attention to me and do it later, but it's the www.alertscc.org. And if you're already registered, you can read through it and check, did I change anything? For me, we canceled our home phone service, so I had to go in and turn that off, and I added a new cell phone, so I had to add that. So you can go and make sure it's updated. Go ahead and put yourself on mute.
Couldn't get on my
Denise.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You can make sure that everybody in your household is registered, particularly if you have teens or other people that have cell phones. Get them on too. We'll use this to send out messages. It might be a county-wide thing, like sending out time to shelter in place, or it might be targeted by neighborhood, like an evacuation warning. And I would recommend just make a note in your calendar, once a year at least, go through and check it, and then you can update your contact info. You can see up on the right-hand box there, I had the phone numbers. And I would suggest you go ahead and put that in your phone address book, because then you'll know that you should answer it. It's not somebody trying to tell you that, the IRS wants you to mail them gift cards to Target or whatever the scammers do these days. You'll know it's an official alert. It's coming from Alert SCC. For city or town of Los Altos Hills, their messages will come from county communications. For city of Los Altos, if we sent out our own message, it's the 947-2800, and then the county messages are coming from that 808 number. So write this down, put it in your address book so you know who's calling. Next up is Nixle. So these are usually local notices, and you can sign up for that. You just take your phone, open a new text message, like you're gonna say to me, Ann, I wanna buy you an ice cream cone, but instead of my phone number, you're putting in the phone number 888-777. And then instead of typing in Ann, meet me at Baskin Robbins, you'll type in the zip code you want to register. So you could put in 94024 and you hit enter, and then it'll come back with a message, something like you're now registered for Los Altos Nixle. And you can do up to 5 zip codes as long as you do it one at a time. Because you might say, well, I'm going to put in my home zip code, and I go downtown, and I do my shopping in Cupertino, and my spouse works in Santa Clara, whatever it is that works for you of areas you're going to want to know about. And in the right, I have a screen grab from a message we sent out like last February for the kind of message that'll come. They usually say who they're coming from, tell you what to do, and you're not getting very many of them. Next up, our emergency notifications are WEA, Wireless Emergency Alerts. And these you don't need to sign up for. They're gonna come to your phone as long as your wireless carrier participates in the program. You might be able to block them. Like the other day we got one and my husband quickly got out his phone and tried to figure out how to block it. Please don't block them. You're gonna possibly miss some important information. They're not going out very often, and you're gonna wanna see the information that comes. They target it to a certain geographical area. For example, if they're doing an evacuation alert, they draw the boundary on the map so that the WEA messages are going to the place that they want to pay attention to it. Every once in a while they bleed over a little bit or whatever, depending on location of cell towers, but they're getting better and better at that. And then there's the emergency alert system, right? You can listen to it on a radio. You'll get information about emergencies. So let's talk about the family communications planning. We would recommend that as a family or as a household, depending on your circumstance, how are we going to communicate with each other in a disaster or an emergency? Who are we going to set as our out of area contact? Where are we going to meet up if we were separated or if we're in different places around the region when the emergency occurs? And if we're not home or if we're separated, who's going to take care of the vulnerable members of our household? And what phone numbers do we need to have? So let's talk about these, right? So how will we communicate? You might be able to call by phone. We're kind of expecting that a major earthquake in our region, you won't be able to, but you might be able to. You might be able to communicate by cell phone, but they found in the fires, and this is only logical, but I hadn't really thought it through, if the cell towers burn, you're not going to have cell phone service. So, don't be thinking 100% I'm going to be on the phone. Same thing with text. You might not be able to communicate by text. You may be able to call by text when you can't phone because it's going to take less data. Amateur radio or ham radio, that's going to work. We'll talk more about that. You might think, oh, we're going to leave notes for each other, right? If I get home and no one's home, I'm going to take notes and put it on the door. Well, are you going to have paper? Are you going to have pen? Are you going to have tape? Where are you going to stash it so it's ready? Are you going to communicate through someone else, like your out of area contact we'll talk about in a minute, or voicemail or something else? So as a household, do some brainstorming. Think about how you're going to pass information to each other, and everybody in your house needs to know. Okay, not the 6-month-old, but pretty much everybody in your household knows how to do it or who they're going to rely on to help them. So we talked for a minute about the phone, but you also have to have a way to recharge it, right? So, great, my phone's all charged up. Well, actually, let's look. Yeah, it's pretty decent. But how am I going to recharge it when I run it down? Do you have a car charger, right? Because you could run it off your car for a while. Do you have a battery pack? Is it charged? How do you keep it charged? Do you have one of those solar chargers or one of the hand crank chargers that you can use to charge your phone? You can buy them out in the market. And then the other thing to consider is your voicemail, right? If your phone is working, your voicemail can be an important tool. I spent some time looking it up and realized I'm going to need my husband's help because he's the one in charge of our account and I can't get in without his login, but I have to find out how, because I want to know, one of my goals for this month is to learn how to get remote access to my messages so that even if I left my phone behind or it ran out of power, I could borrow Denise's cell phone and log into my voicemail and listen to it to see if my family has left me messages. And I could change my outgoing message. So I could say, hi, this is Ann. I'm okay. I'm taking refuge over at Diane's house. Find me there, or whatever it is, so that we could pass messages to each other that way. Amateur radio. So here's the advertisement. It's going to work. So we strongly encourage everybody to go ahead and get your ham license. That, of course, will be able to link you to the outside world. You'll be able to call other hams. You'll be able to hear more about what's going on. And we would love it if you would volunteer to support emergency communications in your community if needed. So you can go to this website, www.laars.org. That's the Los Altos one, but the volunteers there would be happy to introduce you to their colleagues across the region. And they love introducing folks to ham radio and encouraging them to get their license and getting them plugged in. Ha ha, pun. The out of area contact, the idea here is if cell phone, texting, telephone doesn't work, internet doesn't work, you still might be able to call outside the area or send a text outside the area because of how the circuits are. The local circuits may be overloaded, but you might be able to get out of the area. So find somebody that's going to be your out of area contact. For me, it's my cousin in Wisconsin. But you got to make sure everybody knows that, right? So make sure that whoever you pick knows they are the out of area contact and knows what to do, that the household members are going to call that person and that they're going to be responsible for passing messages back and forth. And make sure everybody in your household knows who we're calling and puts their name or number in their plans and in their address book and knows who it is, right? So that they're not going in a disaster. Who are we calling? Was it Karen or was it Amy? Or that everybody knows so that the messages get through. Another important thing is to have your reunification plan, right? Where will we meet up if we were separated when the event occurs? And we'd suggest that you make a couple of different plans, right? One would be real near the house, right? So great, real near the house. If there's a house fire and we all had to get out, where are we going to meet up? Okay, we're going to meet at Richard's mailbox or whatever it is. And then maybe it's not safe there. So in our neighborhood, where's our backup plan? Oh, we'll meet at the school or whatever it is. Or a meeting point outside the city. Maybe we have to evacuate from our region and our family members in San Francisco and another one is in Milpitas. Where are we going to get reunited if we can't talk on the phone, but we can get there physically? How are you going to meet up? Think about that. And then think about the vulnerable members of your household, right? If nobody's at home, parents are at work, and the event happens, who's going to take care of people? One, of course, would be pets, right? You have a dog, great. The dog's in the house. Eventually, maybe you'll have to pee on the floor, but it's going to need water. It's going to need food. Your cat, well, cats are pretty self-sufficient. Your chickens, everything's going to need food and water, even your cat. So you want to think about, is there somebody that knows the pets that you trust to have a key that's going to be around, right? You can't pick the neighbor that goes regularly to Asia for 2 weeks because they're a pilot or whatever. You want to find somebody who's around all the time. And you want to make sure you've stored emergency supplies for the pets and that that person knows where that is so that they can pull out the additional food and supplies for the animal. Then if you have young children or children in school, you'll want to take some time to study. What is the evacuation plan for the school? Where are they going to take the kids? What are their plans for picking up the kids? What do they, how do you give permission for pickup? When my kids are in school, every year they'd ask us to review our emergency contacts and they'd say, who are you going to give permission to pick up your kids if you cannot? Well, it's real important that those people know they're the emergency pickup, right? So when the event happens, they know they can get my kids and that my kids know. So if Richard shows up in school and says, I'm here to get you, there's been an emergency, they'll say, oh yeah, we talked about that. And they won't refuse to go with him. Some families have a family password that they give so that the kids know mom and dad has asked this person to pick me up so that they don't go with somebody even that they might know if it's not permission from the parents. And you want to think about those emergency contacts. How likely are they to be available? And are they near the school? For us, it's no good listing my nephew who lives in San Francisco to come pick up my kids because he's not nearby when the disaster occurs. For me, it needs to be somebody who lives really near the school that the kids already know, that I trust, et cetera, et cetera. And then consider your family members with special needs. Maybe somebody has mobility challenges, hearing difficulties, sight difficulties. Maybe they have developmental delays. Think also about languages. If family members or household members are not fully fluent in English, or you have somebody that comes and visits you for extensive time. A lot of times people have their mother come from another country and stay for 6 months, and she may not speak English fluently. Think about everybody's special needs. Maybe it's medication, maybe it's special medical equipment, and make a plan, have a backup for your plan, and then have a backup for the backup. I was talking with a community member the other day, her husband is paraplegic. And I asked her, hey, do you have a plan? She says, oh yes, we have this equipment all here, all ready to go. And so-and-so across the street is my backup. And then we have, she was 3 or 4 people deep. I said, you make my heart so happy. I talked to somebody else who has a special needs wife, and he says, yep, in the van, the van is always gassed up and ready to go, and we have all the gear in it, and it was great to hear. So just step back and think about family members, household members with special needs. What are those needs? What do you need to plan for in an evacuation? And make sure you have backups to those plans. Now, another advertisement. Here in Los Altos, we have what we call the Los Altos Block Action Team. Other communities have similar things. They'll vary in name, but the spirit of it is pretty much the same, right? To build that feeling of community, to get to know each other, to help each other. And then in our case, also to help people get better prepared for emergencies. So just remember, your neighbors can help. So get to know your neighbors. What are their capabilities? You know, how could they help you? What are their needs? How can you help them? And then you can prepare together. And if you get organized in a block action team or whatever it's called in your city, so much the better, because now you're part of you're committing to a community effort together. So what kind of phone numbers are you going to need to have? Just think about what is a phone number you may need to call. And it's going to depend on your household, right? You should have your out of area now contact, right? Definitely out of area contact. You probably want to have written down the phone numbers of people in your household, right? For me, I have a program on the phone. I have my husband's cell phone number memorized because I had to know that before I got my phone. But my kids, I just press the button. Well, if my phone's out of battery, I'm not going to be able to call them, right? So you want to make sure you have them programmed on your phone, but also have it printed out or have some backup for that. You might want to have the numbers for the emergency contacts for the kids or for certain neighbors or your pet care contact. Depending on what your needs are, you might need to know what's a medical supply company that I could call to get things to me quickly if needed. Maybe your employer has a work emergency information line so you can find out for your spouse, hey, what's going on? And they would be able to, you could listen to the recording and know, are they supposed to stay put or are they on their way home? You know, just think about some things and put a list together for yourself so you have it ready. There's a lot of great tools to get you going, right? But we want you to fill out your plan, put down your thought, write it down, print it out, give everybody a copy. I would strongly recommend folks go to this Ready SCC. It's an app available on Android and iPhone. Santa Clara County put it together, and it walks you through step-by-step to preparedness, and it has spaces for you to enter a bunch of this data, so it's all in one place in your pocket. Do One Thing is a great resource on their site. I found they have a guide on family communication plan. Of course, County Fire has great information, and they have a whole class. And FEMA, of course, has good information. If you go to losaltosca.gov/communication plan, should be easy to remember, right? That website, I have a screenshot there. We have links to some of the FEMA blank kits, or blank formats for communication plans. So that can help you get started, and then you can adjust it as you need for your own household. The important thing is that you start. So we want you to not put it off. Hopefully folks have our beautiful, at least if you're in your Los Altos, you have your beautiful Los Altos preparedness calendar. And our theme for the month of January is make a plan. Because the new year is a great time to make or update your household's emergency plans, family emergency communication plans, evacuation routes, fire escape plan and meeting point, and so forth. So take the hint for January and just start. So now let's turn to Denise, and she'll talk to us about evacuation stuff.
Great, thanks, Ann. How's my volume? How's my audio's good? Okay. One other addition that I want to do, it's kind of on topic still, is where do you get your emergency information? Where is your sourcing? Because a lot of people I know in Los Altos Hills, they really like Nextdoor, which is, it's a great way to get information, but it may not be the most accurate information. So make sure that you're on trusted resources. We're going to talk about that a little further down. But along with communication is think of, where do I get my information? Where is it coming from? So we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the slide, but I'm going to invite people. My portion now is going to focus a little bit heavier on evacuation planning, especially into a little bit of vegetation planning as far as evacuations and what that looks like. In case you don't know, I retired from Santa Clara County Fire a couple of years ago, very passionate about preparedness. My focus as emergency services manager has mostly been around vegetation and evacuation. Victoria helps me out with, helps Los Altos Hills managing our CERT volunteers and help getting some of these messages out. So thank you again for coming out for your time. I apologize for my technical difficulties. I'm in a vehicle doing this because usually my iPad is my source and I'm having to go off my computer. So I apologize. Okay, so evacuation.
Just an additional advert. She served at the Loyola Fire Station, so she knows our area very well.
Yeah, yeah.
And I additional flavor.
I went to a few wildland fires too, so I can tell you what it is and what it isn't as far as possibilities around evacuation. So again, and this isn't just when you're at home, and this isn't just for fires. Okay, I want people to be proactive and take this information. The thing about CERT, the grassroots component of it, is take it and share it with somebody. Share it with as many people as you can. This is all very generic information that's gathered from very generic sources. So, please take it, pay it forward to somebody else, even just the little portions that you think are most applicable to them. But definitely get them to register for the alerts in their area. They have them in every place. It doesn't have to be Santa Clara County. So if someone lives in another place, help them find where their alert is. Make sure they get signed up, so that they can have best outcomes. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to prepare a resilient community for best outcomes. And that's going to be self-reliance, because 911 is not going to be available in a big event. So that's not who's going to be our rescue plan. Okay. So anyhow, so where are you? Okay. And again, it's not just out of your home. Are you at the grocery store? How does that change your plan? Are you out of town? How does that change your plan? Who's still at home? Those are all those things that it's not just a one and done. You need to update the plan according to how the plan may change. Next slide. So we teach this back to little kids in kindergarten. Is no two ways out of the house. Crawl low under smoke. Check the door. All those types of things. So no two ways out of your home. Obviously, in a fire, please have a working smoke alarm. I mean, that's obviously, we want that early notification. We've talked about that from getting that from an electronic source, but now we have a mechanical source. Really important that that's working. It's the nice thing now that you don't have to replace batteries in the newer models. That was always one of the problems with the smoke alarms, is you had to replace those batteries. Now, if you buy a new one and install it, it'll be good for 10 years. So what's two ways out of your home? If you're relying, say we go back to the children, to go out a second story and you're using an escape ladder, you need to practice that, because at night in the dark, just like we're going to talk about other evacuation routes, is not the first time you should be figuring out how to do or use this. So as Anne's already kind of mentioned, she had backup plans to her, depending on the emergency, of where she could go. So do you know two ways out of your neighborhood? What happens if your main thoroughfare is blocked? When you get into places like Los Altos Hills or Los Gatos and Saratoga up in the mountains, that doesn't become as direct. That you may end up going up some really pretty, narrow, windy, lots of lefts and right turns. So can you do that? Can you do that in the dark? Can you do it without a GPS? Can you do it in smoke? Those are all things that you got to kind of realize, that this might be a worst case scenario. And can I know a second way out? And again, that's being situationally aware. That's something we try to train CERTs in, that CERT size up, is situational awareness, and kind of reevaluate what's going on all the time. And then obviously the second component, especially around wildland fires, is when to go. When do we leave? We're going to talk about that a little bit more coming up, and what you might want to evaluate. Next slide. I think we were going to have a video. Can we do a video? So again, this is going to be focused on wildland evacuation. If this is something you're not super interested in, please feel free to if you don't want to know, but it's some really good information. Just in general, this is actual footage from a couple of people that were leaving the Santa Rosa fire. Again, this is at night, but I wanted to let you appreciate what a fire actually looks like leaving from someone's home. Thanks, Anne. Let's see if we can. Well, kind of cut off a little bit short, but that kind of gives you a flavor. He ends up talking a little bit later on.
I have the greatest job.
Oops. And, you know, you can hear the anxiety in his breathing and his voice. There's embers blowing all across the road, and that fire, power poles were burning through, so lines were down on the ground. It makes it very sketchy. You know, you may have to turn around and go somewhere else. We can go back to the PowerPoint whenever you
Okay.
can grab it.
Yeah, I think we got interrupted by the advertisement there. So.
Yeah. Oh, is it still running? Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
it looks like it moved over to the campfire.
Yeah. Do you want
That's
me to
all
try
right. I just wanted you to get the flavor of, these videos are obviously all over the internet, but you know, just the amount of embers that are flowing around, the heat. I'm going to tell you, the heat and the smoke are just really, really overwhelming. When we were up at the campfire, as a wildland firefighter, you don't wear that breathing apparatus, and that the smoke with the sustained winds, because oftentimes we have red flag conditions, which I'll talk about, and the sustained winds are just blowing that smoke, and you're crying and you're coughing and your nose is running, and it's not a comfortable event. The other thing that happens is you start to become hypoxic, which is a lack of oxygen to your brain, which makes decision making more difficult. So you might not make this decision. So if you haven't practiced those evacuation routes really well, you may get confused. Things won't look the same as they do in the daytime. So again, practice those at night, driving around, try some different routes without using GPS, so you're really comfortable with that. Hopefully you can just go out early on early evacuation, not have any of these problems. But of course, we don't want to scare, but we want to prepare. We want to look at worst case outcomes. And that's kind of where we develop CERT from, is worst case outcomes. A really bad earthquake happens. We have to be self-sufficient. We're kind of doing the same thing here with thinking about evacuation. So again, as I've kind of mentioned already, know how to get out. Obviously know your main routes, but know other ways that you can get out in case those aren't available. We've talked about being prepared. You know, who do you need to get in your car? How long does that take? You know, so having that go bag ready. So if it's a really very little notification, it's just grabbing the most minimum of supplies and the loved ones, furry and two-legged, and getting everybody in the car, getting out of there. If you do have someone with access and functional needs, someone who is mobility limited, when we talk about red flag warning, that's the time that people that live in those areas, they should be leaving then. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on red flag. But again, if you want to specifically look, and I apologize, we've only really focused on Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. If you're from another area, we love to have other people from other CERT programs. But get on your website and do Google search of your town's evacuation plan. Paradise had a great evacuation plan. It takes 8 hours for them to do it. Obviously, when you have 2 or 3 hours to evacuate a whole town with a fire bearing down on it, moving a football field a second, it's not going to happen. So again, early notification is going to be key. It's what we're planning for now is little or no notification of a fast moving fire. So that's what we're kind of working with the premise here and the assumption. Okay, here's a couple of links that Anne's put up here for us. And again, remember, these roads are going to have fire engines and police officers all coming in, especially the narrow roads, and you're coming out. You know, we get that bottlenecking, or the, you know, going upstream when everybody's coming downstream. So all that's going to be happening. So the earlier you get out, the easier it also makes it for firefighters and first responders to come in to the area and be able to do their jobs. Next slide.
Sorry, I don't know why. When there's a pause, it's because I can't get my screen to advance. There we go.
That's okay. We can skip the video. We kind of saw that already.
Yep.
So here's a couple of different types of evacuations. Toyon Farms is in Los Altos, and they practiced a little bit of a community. A lot of these community type practicing can almost be a tabletop. You know, you don't have to necessarily get in and go drive somewhere. We did end up doing that up in our Los Altos Hills. Anne, do you want to talk a little bit more about how they did the Toyon evacuation?
Sure. So with the Toyon Farms, they had a project. They sat down, they had a small team, and they put together an actual evacuation guide, and it's a binder. And they had information there about who to call and maps and how to get out, as well as some instructions. And they distributed that to everybody in this little community of, I guess they're mostly townhomes, I'm not quite sure. And it's a private community with private roads, but they worry about getting out because they've got a lot of vegetation. So they have some beautiful large trees, but the road's a little windy and there's hills, and there's a canyon and stuff. So they were worried about it. So they ended up, after they distributed that evacuation guide, they held a walking drill. So we worked with them to send out a test alert on our alert SCC so that they could find out, oh, I thought I was registered, but I didn't get it. Okay, go figure out why, get yourself registered. They had a little briefing. They worked with fire and with police to work together on this. And they literally walked the exit roads and they practiced, how do we open our gate so that we could get out this way if we had to. So it was a real great way for them to not only conceptualize, but also physically practice and see what it would be like.
Great, thanks, Anne. We've done a similar type of evacuation drill up in Los Altos Hills, Saddle Mountain area. We initially did kind of a PEP presentation, which is personal emergency preparedness, and then a wildland evacuation workshop, which gets a little bit more specifically into evacuation. And we actually did a little event where we exercised the Alert SCC system, because if you think about it, in a big event, that platform needs to send everybody messages depending on the area that's affected. So the time that it takes, how did you sign up for your messaging? Did you get it the ways that you signed up? So it was a great way to exercise the alert system. The Nixle is actually what we have in Los Altos Hills, but it's connected in to the Alert SCC system. So they got the same type of practice with that so that they can see if it is working indeed for them. All right, next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the types of evacuations. You can actually get something called an evacuation alert, and with the CZU, the Santa Cruz fire, the lightning complex back in August, September, they actually did get a warning up in the Los Trancos Page Mill Road area for possible evacuation when the fire was moving quickly and they didn't have the resources to slow it down. When CAL FIRE drew their containment objectives, they drew the box that they draw around fires. They drew it to Highway 84 in the north of that fire, to Highway 1 in the west, to Highway 17 in the south, and Highway 280 in the east. So Highway 280 included all of Los Altos Hills that was west of 280 in the containment box. So they actually did get an alert during that fire. That is obviously something that we've looked at, that they need some better fire breaks than 280 in the east. So they're looking to make a hardening of Highway 35 as a better fire break. But they did get an alert, which is, again, that's the time, if you have access and functional needs people, that's the time that you need to go to the friend's house that lives, someplace not in the wildland, the hotel, whatever the plan is. That's the time to do it, because that's the person that is going to need the most help. And if you're actually under an order, they will not let anybody drive in to go get those people if that is their plan. If someone has to drive in from Los Altos City to go help someone in Los Altos Hills, if they're under an evacuation order, they will not be allowed to go in and get them. So obviously those outcomes are possible in a fast-moving fire. So a warning is still in that phase of it may or may not turn into an actual order. But we've always said, if you're thinking about it, if you're concerned, then leave. Leave early, pack up, get out. It can always be a practice, a dry run, and then come back. So again, when I mentioned red flag warning, this is issued by the National Weather Service. You'll see it on the news sometimes. They talk about it. If it's actually in the area that you live in either Santa Clara County or somewhere out of the county, this is actually, I liken it to what the Midwest looks at a tornado warning. This is kind of like the tornado warning. This is the, hey, I need to get everything ready, because let's look at these fires that had high fatalities. Santa Rosa, Redding, the Paradise Fire. They were all under red flag warnings. So red flag warning is usually high heat, low humidity, and high winds. Now we also have tied in with that a PG&E, PSPS, or Public Safety Power Shutoff. They hit the same criteria to do those shutoffs, and some people have probably already been affected by those. They've started doing those the last couple of years. So now let's add in there that we can't even get our notification because the power's off. So how are you situationally aware? Ann had mentioned ham radios, NOAA weather radios. These are all things that we need to start paying attention to if we're concerned and living in those areas. So as the fire's approaching, again, if you have any concern, if you see smoke over the ridge, things like that, that may be a good possibility. We don't want a bunch of phone calling though either, because we want to keep those lines open. We don't want to get busy signals on should I evacuate, should I evacuate. If you're concerned, even if you haven't gotten an alert yet, go ahead and do the practice run if nothing else. Generally in our homes they're not going to catch on fire right away. As we saw in the vehicles, a vehicle's not a great place to be in a fire, so we want to be out as early as possible. That's where most of the people died up in Paradise, were in the vehicles as the fire burned over Skyway. So we want to make sure that we get out as early as possible, because if we do have one car that breaks down, and we always talk in preparedness about having your gas tank, or if your electric vehicle, having it fully charged, having your gas tank, when you get to half, consider that empty and go ahead and fill it up. You can get a long way. You don't want to be that person standing in that line of cars and now your car is out of gas and it's stopping everybody behind you like a cork in a bottle. So again, we want to make sure that we're always prepared, always ready. And again, if you feel like you're worried, or you have someone with special needs, or you have horses, things like that. People were calling me, should I evacuate my horses now? I said, would you rather evacuate them now or in the middle of the night with smoke and everything else, especially hard to load animals? So I said, practice it. Go take it to your place that you have set up and see how it goes. So that at least now, our brain, when we get in a stressful situation, we lose our prefrontal cortex. That's our thinking machine. We lose that. We go back to the amygdala and we get reactionary. That's our reptilian brain, and everything is on reaction. So if you've kind of trained some calmness into your reaction because you've either practiced it before and it's not the first time, your fear level goes down and you continue to use that prefrontal cortex instead of all reactionary. So that's again what training, talking, preparing is helping, is keeping that prefrontal cortex, the thinking thing, versus the reactionary brain. Next slide. Okay, so again, like I said, a lot of my focus here is around the wildland planning, but it doesn't mean that you can't do some of this in a residential home in an urban setting. Because embers, let's talk again about Santa Rosa. Forest Hill was up at the top. It was the very exclusive kind of big giant homes. Yeah, I can see why they burned. Their wildland urban interface, which is the wildland interfacing with the urban community. Well, down at the bottom of that hill is Coffee Park. It's one of the poorest areas in Santa Rosa. They all burned equally. Fire doesn't respect economic boundaries. And the fire burned from the hills into the complete flats neighborhoods, alike akin to Los Altos Hills is to Los Altos. So it's not unreasonable to say, I can still do some preparedness in an urban setting that might have a better outcome for my home. Or if you do remodeling considerations, things that are less combustible in your remodeling considerations. So again, what are some things you can do? Defensible space around your home. This includes decks, fencing, sheds, ADUs, the alternate dwelling units. Those are very popular now. All those things need enough space around them that embers or direct flame won't come and catch things on fire as easily. And I can get into a lot more of this around a vegetation management, but just kind of thinking about property hygiene. Dead things burn easier than live things. So you want to collect up all the dead materials and get them off the property. So those can be in gutters, cleaning out gutters regularly, a couple times a year, especially if you have trees that make messes and land in your gutter, because that's a nice receptive fuel bed for an ember to land, because those embers can fly mile ahead of a fire. And they look, I can tell you Santana Row, downtown San Jose, when it burned in pre-construction, it caught an apartment building roof on fire across 280, so 6 lanes of freeway. So that was just a structure fire. That wasn't even a wildland fire. But the winds and the embers blew across and caught an apartment building roof on fire. So what can you do if you, we call this home hardening. So it's fireproofing the exterior of your home, fire resistant roofing materials, stucco, aluminum siding, fire retardant paints. You can change out your exterior vents because most of them are 1/4-inch mesh, and we recommend going down to 8-inch mesh. And they also have special vents that you can soffit your roof line, that's under your roof, or the vents, they actually have a gel, so when it's permeated by heat, it activates the gel, and the gel actually stops the embers from getting into those vents and starting a roof fire, or underneath the house and starting a sub fire underneath the ground floor if you don't have a slab construction. And then here's some alternate things if you have these and are interested, or you're putting a pool or something in, or you're putting a storage tank, is having street access to an alternative water source. They call it a wharf hydrant generally. It's not like your standard hydrant that's in a residential municipal area. It's a 2.5-inch connection off a pipe that comes from a pretty substantial water source like a pool or a large storage tank. This picture over here is just showing some of the zones around the home, and this comes from the Fire Safe Council, and we'll show that link later on here. Okay, so what are some other wildfire considerations? And again, these aren't exclusive to wildland. We've talked about the power safety shutoffs. A lot of people have gone with generator options or solar options to help get around some of those shutoff issues. So having backup electrical power. Natural gas is usually the best. If you have natural gas, people that live out in the country sometimes have to go with propane. Problem with gasoline is the amount of storage and the amount that you have to refill. So it's great when you get these larger units to have alternative fuels. They can go with dual fuels. Solar charging, again, what type of battery storage do you have on your solar unit? And then just batteries in general. Do you have batteries for your flashlights, for your phones, for things that you might need in an emergency? And then some considerations during evacuations. One of the biggest things, if the power's out because maybe the power shut off, is garage doors. If they're an older home or an older garage door, they probably do not have a battery backup. So especially someone that maybe has access to some functional needs, are they able to unlock? Do they even know how to unlock the cable or the drive and be able to manually, physically lift the door up? So a consideration, if you're upgrading a garage door, make sure that battery backup's in place. Or if you're hooking up to alternative energy like generators and whatnot, make sure that that circuit is into that system. And then also a consideration, again, is emergency lighting, whatever form that takes. That might be from a generator, or that may be from flashlights, just how are you going to get out if it's dark? Because this is great to say, oh, I'm loading this in my car and that in my car. Okay, now it's completely dark and you have nothing but flashlights. Headlamps are really good also. Keeps your hands free because you're not holding your light or your phone while you're loading your car. So considering those types of things, again, put yourself in worst case situation and work backwards and see how you can mitigate that and think through it. Next slide, Ann. Okay, like I mentioned, this has been mostly focused around wildland fires, but it's also property hygiene and home hardening, creating defensible space. Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council has some really great information. They're a nonprofit here in Santa Clara County. Their primary mission is just to have a better outcome for the public when it relates to wildland fires. So preparedness for that possibility. We've already mentioned Santa Clara County. They offer classes in preparedness also. And they have a Ready, Set, Go program. All of these programs really are all tied into each other. So the messaging, when you look at it, should look very similar. No one's out going rogue and making up their own, this is how we do it. We want it to all look pretty much the same. So, again, if you get on some of these sites and put our contact information, if there's anything that you want to reach out and get more information on some of this, or, go to more classes, or have somebody come and see this recording, things like that you think it might be interested in. We really appreciate that kind of information sharing because, if we have 15 people say tonight, if we can get another 15 people, because you each share it with one person and they all share it with another person, even just a small nugget out of this, that's where we really want to go, that grassroots moving things forward. Do we have another slide other than a thank you? I think oh, okay, yeah, we do. I forgot. These are a couple of other ways kind of more proactive, you know, websites that you can, things that, alert systems you can use that aren't directly notifying you. We've already talked about signing up for Alert SEC and making sure that it works. Having a drill obviously is a great way to know how it works and how long it takes. Red flag warnings, again, you can get those from weather broadcasts, from the news. Obviously, if you have sirens in your area, one of the things that we can recommend is looking at Pulse Point. This is a free app that you can put on your phone. You can find out what's going on. Maybe you're going to go take off and there was just a vehicle accident. It makes a difference what route you take, but you can see on that, it allows you to follow whatever organizations that are members on it. So you can follow County Fire, you can follow police, you can follow CAL FIRE, you know, whatever it is, you can follow them and see. Only thing that I can warn you about is you might want to make sure you turn the notifications off at night. 70%, 70, maybe even 80% of calls are medical calls, and that happens all night long. So if that notification is ringing on all night long, it might be a long night for you. So you might want to either just do it during red flags where you're listening during the nighttime, or you want to just have the notifications off at night and use it at your discretion. You can download that free. Again, it was originally set up to put people who knew CPR and AEDs together in a life-saving CPR situation. That was the original development. It actually comes out oftentimes prior, when we have this on, when I was working on the fire department, we have this on our phones. We actually get dispatched to our area faster than the dispatcher comes in, because this rolls out as soon as calls start going in that area. So we would actually get a pre-alert even sooner than we would get our actual dispatch from. So it is very real time. So next slide. And again, general resources. Anne has given us some things to start off with tonight. We don't want to overwhelm people. Like she said, just doing one thing, you know, one starting thing, then look at the recording and go back for another one. But just doing something, you know, we're offering a bunch of different types of training, some cert-centric, some a little off. There's a Stop the Bleed class coming up here in a couple of weeks, or another week and a half, next the 28th. You know, so there's a lot of variety in the types of classes that are being offered. But a lot of this, you can go out on your own and start looking at various, you know, various resources. Again, where do you get your information? Highly recommend hooking up with your local town government. Next door, not so much in emergencies, because that's neighbors telling what's going on. Right now, I don't know that that is necessarily the best way. I would stick with the, you know, things that are agencies, like police agencies, town governments, their Twitters, their Facebooks, their websites. Those are the types of information. You want to make sure they're vetted where you get your information. Obviously, if you're signed up for alerts, it's going to get pushed to you. That information is going to get pushed to you in a whatever format you've chosen. But again, here's some more places to look for information. And next slide.
And the other thing I would add is, if you go to the losaltosca.gov/emergency prep, we have a whole bunch of information. You should be able to navigate through it. losaltosca.gov/prepares, and takes you to the page where you registered for tonight's webinar. And we're listing upcoming webinars as we have them, as well as recordings. So tonight we've done a recording. We'll be posting there the materials from tonight, so you can come back and look at it, as well as a link to the recording so you can view it again or refer others to it. So with that, let's open it up for questions. Victoria, what do people want to know about?
I don't see any questions so far.
Okay.
So just another thing too is, Leanne's got that. Check out on our Los Altos Hills, Victoria's going to start putting like our YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, putting videos on that, recordings, you know, things that we've done with Los Altos, also the hills. We're going to try to really have a lot of resources for people to look at, and you don't have to be a CERT. So we're really trying to use it also as a recruitment tool if someone isn't a CERT yet, because right now to become a CERT is kind of tough because of COVID, and we're just working through that. So we want to hopefully by the spring, summer be able to offer that opportunity to people again. But in the meantime, we still need people to be resilient. They don't have to be a CERT to be resilient. They might not understand some of the concepts that we talk about, but everything tonight had nothing to do with CERT.
Yeah.
It all just was about preparedness. So again, passing this on to other people, really appreciate that.
And we're all counting on each household to do a basic measure of preparedness, because when the big disaster comes region-wide, it might be a while till you get help. So we want you to be able to help yourself and help your family and hopefully help your neighbors and do it in a safe way.
Yeah, and again, along that same line is there is not enough first responders to help everybody. Everybody will be, you know, self-reliant, and we have COVID on top of it. So there's already a lot of difficulties going on. You know, unfortunately, preparedness is current event driven. I can even tell you people are getting a little apathetic again about wildland fires. And we just had one of the most awful wildland seasons that, you know, we've had locally. And people already are kind of forgotten. Flooding, we haven't had flooding for several years. It doesn't take much. An earthquake, they continue to say it's not if, it's just when. You know, Hayward Fault is way overdue. You know, so again, you know, what does the disaster look like? What can we do to prepare? You know, and this is all in that same vein. So thank you again for your time. My end.
We do have one question that popped up. Are you doing ongoing CERT training in Los Altos?
Well, the answer is yes and sort of and no. So every year we typically would host what we call CERT Academy, and Santa Clara County Fire does the training for us. And it's 21 hours of training. You learn how to help yourself and how to help your neighbors in a safe way. It's like everything you want to know how to do the first aid and search and rescue, but stay safe. Right now, because of COVID, we can't do that in a hands-on way. So we've been having a lot of discussions at the county level on how can we do this. And we think we are close to having a plan where we'd be able to do some classes online and then figure out a way how to do some of the hands-on practice later on. So stay tuned. If you go to that losaltosca.gov emergency prep site, I'm sorry, I can't remember how you navigate around, but there's a page about CERT. I think it's pretty easy to find. And there's a little button or a little link there that says, click here if you want to sign up to be on the waiting list for CERT. And if you do that, then I have your name. And when we have a plan, I'm able to reach out and email you and saying, hey, great news. We now have CERT training coming. So sign up and here's what you do. So I invite folks to do that.
And if you have somebody you know that's interested, please invite them to these trainings, because all of this really helps when you go through the CERT training. It's not the first time you hear everything, so that's really helpful. Also, County Fire just put out a list of some of their refresher courses this evening. I saw that come out. So,
but you should be a CERT first.
Yeah, you should be a CERT first, but a lot of you're welcome to come out and see what we're doing on these virtual components. If you want to with Los Altos Hills, you're welcome to, you know, watch it. You might not understand all of it, but you're welcome to watch it and see what's going on if you're really interested, because we hate to delay, you know, people in learning because of the situation.
Just want to get you knowledge.
Yeah, and because it is. I mean, it's, some of it when you learn, you know, how to do a head to toe, you know, exam and insert, it's a little bit unique, you know, and it's hard to review that if you've never done it. But at least if you kind of watch what's going on when you go through it yourself, you know, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. You know, it's a little bit more comfort level maybe too. So it's nothing that's, you know, super, you know, whatever, but you're not going to have the certificate that you're CERT, and you're not going to be with the CERT program until you actually go through the official training. So.
Well, I'm not seeing more questions come through. Q&A and chat is open. We hope that this has been a useful day for you. Again, go to losaltosca.gov/prepares to see the upcoming webinars and the recordings like this one and the presentation like this one. Los Altos Hills County Fire District has their website with information and educational stuff. And, you know, the losaltosca.gov/emergency prep has a whole bunch of links and information. So I think not seeing more questions, we really appreciate everybody coming. Do share it out, and we hope to see you at a future session. And I'll stop the, whoops, I see a question coming in. No, a comment. And with that, I think I'll stop our recording.